This is probably 10 to 14 years old. And I went through it and took out about half of it um, that didn't really pertain anymore, but there's still plenty in here that doesn't. Uh, I don't know about you guys, but every once in a while, somebody will give me something and they'll say, Here, you can have this. Isn't that nice of me? And I think, What the hell am I going to do with this? So there are some things that can be salvaged and used, and that's what I'm going to talk about here. Right now, the railroad I have now is an out and back branch line model 8 to 50, depending on the locomotives. And again, here you can have this, is why I have to model 48, because I was given things that I didn't think I needed to start with. But it's a terminal railroad, and what is meant by that? It means the layout is a closed loop. It only has inbound and outbound traffic. There's no through traffic. And on my layout, we only operate one train. The first thing I'll talk about is one of the local friends, so-called friends, I'll say. Nice guy gave me this Kato locomotive. And I don't know why he had it. I don't know why he gave it to me, but it can be easily turned into an MSNL unit. Here's a photo of one up at Cedar Lake. You can see that the only thing they really did to it from when it was bought is they put extensions on the stack and they added a yellow striping on the ends. I made one of those engines years ago and I sold it up at a Woodbury show back when they were something worth going to. And a guy named Jack Gooch bought the thing, and here it is on his layout, featured in the 2007 Great Model Railroads. So this is my second unit, the one that somebody, and it shows all the stuff that I did. One thing nice about starting with the Rio Grande unit is all the striping's already there. You just have to fill in some stripes. KJ Trains does a lot of Emmett St. L decals, and that's where the switcher decals and those stripes that I used to fill in where they were missing from the other railroad. Read all this if you want, but I use some Champ stripes and Harold King stripes. The lettering on the unit is from KJ Trains, but it's the lettering there's an issue with, and I'll get into that in some detail here. Also, I paid the NW2s that Kato sells. You have to do a lot of machine work on the weights in order to fit in a speaker and sound encoder. And at the time, I paid to have that done. The other thing that needed to be added to the locomotive was a sunshade. Not a sunshade, but a all-weather window. And this photo shows in the summertime, they would use sunshade, and they just left the sides to that wooden enclosure on the locomotive, and how they stored and remembered what engine, what went on the next summer or next winter, I have no idea. But I thought I would start out by making these shades. I thought different things. And this is a Tichy fire escape and some styrene strips. And I came up with something that looks like this. And I wasn't really too happy with that. So I thought I'd make something different with using just styrene. And also use the sunshade also. And then that combination is on the left, Rev 2, versus the right, which is Rev 1. And I preferred Rev 2, so Rev 1 was out the door. And then back to the lettering again. If you look at the top locomotive, the EMD, and look at the lettering on on the bottom locomotive, the model, it doesn't, the font is not quite the same. There's some issues with it. So I did a little studying, and the Baldwins they bought, the Alcos they bought, and the EMD locomotives they bought all had different fonts. It's most noticeable in the D's before, back in the day when they were still a steam operation and we're just getting into diesels, they needed a way to segregate the diesels from the steam engine. So on these these switchers, they put a D preference for diesel and then lettered them for the month and year that they were purchased. And nobody ever, people that I talked to, nobody ever said it was D741. It was just 741. But if you look at the top two or top three and above the green line, you can see the differences in the lettering between EMD, Alco, and Baldwin. Now down below the green line is the KJ Trains decals. And I had Jerry Glow, who was in the decal business at the time, make me some decals. And the bottom ones are what he came up with, which seems to be much closer than the EMD ones. Here's a combination of Jerry Glow's decals and the EMD ones, and they much closer than the KJ Trains. So here's the unit after it's been re-decaled again and is in service. And then this was sold. I don't know where it went, but I don't have it anymore. Okay, now when the layout, my old layout, which is on the bottom level here, when that was finished, one winter I decided I needed something to build. And there's this really big feed mill that was in operation on the west side of town. So I decided I was going to make that. And the whole winter long, as I'm building this thing, everybody keeps asking my wife and people that come over, what are you going to do that with that? Where are you going to put it? And of course, I had no idea. And then when the time finally came to actually put it somewhere, I just hung it off trapeze operation from the ceiling in the room. So it acted like it's a double deck to the railroad, second deck, but it's not connected to the lower railroad at all. But anyway, I needed stuff to run on this. My railroad down below was set in spring of '54, and this Allied Mills, even though they were open at that time, I had no idea when I wanted to set for an era for them. So I needed something, and the first thing was you can have this if, big if, you do some rearranging with the bottom one. So the top one is a Bowser locomotive with DCC and sound. The bottom one is an old Stuart, same engine, but without sound. So basically what I had to do was take the shell off the bottom one, put it on the top one, and then add all of the proper detailing to it. And then I got to keep the top one, the bottom one. It gets confusing. So to have a Milwaukee unit to run on that Allied Mills, I looked at some photos from Soft Marty, and it was quite common for several years. They used Baldwin switchers here in town. And here's a photo of one of them. And I think this is an S12, but it may be something else, DD4, something or another. I'm not up on my Baldwins anymore. But these locomotives were MUable, so they could use them on locals. And here you see a local coming into the yard here in town. Now, because they were MUable, if you look at the back of the locomotive, there's all kinds of crap on that back handrail in order to be able to connect it to a sister unit. Now, if I've chosen a different type of Alco switcher, they're not MUable, but no, I had to have the damn low numbered ones. And this is a closer up view of all the stuff that I have to build to put on that thing. And so I built it, and I'm still amazed when I was putting these pictures or looking at this thing that I actually built this thing. And I think the only thing worth mentioning here is the necklace chain to go between the two units. One day my wife handed me a necklace and said, "This has some knots in it. Can you get them out?" And I looked at it, took it down to the basement, looked at it for a while longer, went up and said, "Nope, can't get them out." So it's now chained for everything.
I don't
You know,
think
you
that's the
can,
spelling of necklace that you want there, Clark.
oh yeah. Anyway, this is a fuzzy photo, which is probably good because it doesn't look that good from the back. I had to buy some. I couldn't bring myself to strip the paint off that Great Western body, so I traded that to a guy who had an undecorated one, and everybody's happy. And then I had to go to Bowser to get the detail parts for it. So they send me all this stuff in this bright orange color. And you can see here that I've added precision scale glass lights, uh, filled in part of the grill on the front, where the number boards on the Milwaukee always had number boards, and Tichy grabs, which are pretty common on everything I do. And this is a view showing the front. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is that main piece of plastic that blocks that off is 5 thousandths. And you have to be very careful with that 5 thousandths because if you use testers liquid cement, it'll actually melt that stuff. And you can see in the lower left, there's a portion of it that's caved in from adding a little bit too much of the tester cement. But there's another, my friend Bob Drenth, who worked for the Milwaukee and on through the other railroads here in town. He pointed out to me that for some reason, the air hoses on these engines were on the wrong side. They were on the fireman side versus
engineer
engineer
side.
side.
Yeah.
There it is. I knew I knew I had this written in here. That's why I was bluffing and that's why I don't gamble. But anyway, you can see that on both of these locomotives, it's on the other side from where it should be, because mine is on the wrong side. And I don't know if I ever changed it or not.
Yeah, a lot of railroads did that. Actually, it's a lot easier switching when it's on that side.
Maybe that's the purpose. Yep.
Yep, you can always see the engineer.
Yeah, there you go. That works. That makes sense.
I wish they'd do that nowadays, or where I was working anyway.
But anyway, they have an all-weather window on there too. You see the one on the engineer side is open and the fireman side is closed. So my Rev 1, my first attempt was to take a Detail Associates all-weather window and just put a 5 thousandths piece over the top. And I can't cut square. So I thought this isn't going to work. So I built some Modeler's Choice laser cut plastic gondolas in the past for someone. And I had all these screws left over, which are great. You know, these things are marvelous for all kinds of things. But in this particular case, I thought I'll glue two of these things together with the little square in the middle.
Yeah.
And then fill around with the outside until I get it so it fits on the engine. So that's what I did. And I also used probably one ply of facial tissue for the screen or the excuse me, the sunshade that's above it there. Now we're got to set the ear for all this, and we're going to use this engine. And these photos come out of a Milwaukee locomotive book a friend sent me, and you can see that 901 had those X's on that side, and the black paint came down under that railing. And up until at least 6 of 61. But a year and 2 months later, it had been repainted with the stripe raised, the black raised up to the level of that grab, and no X's on the frame. Now this shows putting a sound decoder and speaker in the chassis of that thing, and some of the work that has to be done there that I think I did myself. I know someone that has all of the software for LokSound and prefers those. So I think he's the one that got the decoder for me and would have programmed it. And then there's some photos of the engine when it was done. I did an article in one of the early new Craftsman's, and these are pictures that were in that magazine. As far as I'm concerned now, Craftsman is the only model magazine. And I think that's all of them. And then there's a picture of it working on Allied Mills. This picture ended up being in a calendar, probably put out by the same people that put out, what is it? Some kind of river, Three Rivers, Feather River, I don't know. So some kind of a river productions that does Craftsman, and they put out this this calendar. And the thing that I noticed in this calendar, if you look at the Milwaukee hopper in the unloading shed, look at the width of the wheels. You know, there's so many guys that are talking about the more scale, the .88 wheels all the time. You got to use those. And I've never used them because they are a premium cost. And, but I can see that after looking at this picture, all of my cars with open ends, tank cars and hoppers like this, now have the skinny wheels on. Down the Jason Clocky's one time, and being as I was modeling Milwaukee, he says, here, you can have this car over here. So anyway, thanks, Jason. And here's what, for some reason, I wanted to take the roof off of this. I don't remember why, but I slipped with the knife, and I'll have to fix that scar somewhere along the line here. But it basically shows upgrading a ribside cars model with all the stuff that I usually do with any car, which would be the A-line sill steps and Tichy grab irons, a little bit of brake gear underneath. Now this is my brake gear, not knowing any better. I put the parts on where they were supposed to be, all on one side of the underframe, and then added some rods and piping. And then in RP Psych 13, I think he's passed away now, Jack Spencer. He was a crazy modeler. I mean, the guy was nuts. You can tell by looking at the underside of this boxcar. And the thing in the middle between the cylinder and the reservoir is called a slack adjuster. And I don't know if it's a Royal F or what kind it is. But anyway, I thought I would make my attempt at it. And all I did was slap the piece of plastic on top of the wire that was there and called that good enough. Because the only time you're going to see this is if it falls over. Little upgrades to the end. I moved over the down and added all of the Tichy parts necessary. One thing I like to do up on the longitudinal is instead of using an eye bolt in the corner, which means you have to stick that thing in 3 different holes at the same time, I just put a short piece of wire in there and then cut it off. So this is that car when I thought it was finished with all new relays, and repack data, and added some chalk marks on it. And lo and behold, I always noticed the stuff too late. There was a route card added to the door. So here's my little piece of styrene that I put on. And evidently I got that painted, and this is it on the railroad, ready to go. Now, this one here, it's not I can have this, but you can have this because I owe you money, so I bought you this thing. I walk into a swap meet one time, the guy walks up and hands me this car. I owed you some money and I saw this at a good price, so I bought it for you. Gee, thanks. So it's a nice car. It's different than the ribside cars, as being an Intermountain model. In the Milwaukee Color Guide, they talk about these cars being updated and new doors being put on them and other things they needed. And in the beginning of the project, they would repaint the whole car. But as most projects, as time goes on, it stretches out too long, takes too much money. So all they did was basically just touch up the paint, figuring it all weather out to be the same anyway. So what I did with my car, I want to show on here that the placard on the side of the car was moved from up by Milwaukee to the door, but they left the one on the end up high. They didn't lower it down. But on my car, I lowered down the one on the ends. And to make it look like the other car, like some of it had been freshly painted, I basically masked off a portion of the car that I wanted to look repainted, and then I shot the rest of it with different stuff in an airbrush. So it looks like it has new paint on it, when really it was done the other way around. And then I bought one of these, so I bought one for you too. They're a good deal. These are pretty cars. Gee, thanks. And but again, modeling Allied Mills, here's a photo of them unloading a car, and it's an orange New Haven boxcar that's being unloaded. So I thought, what the hell, I can use this thing. So anyway, here's the car put together with the normal changes that I make using the A-line sill steps. This one has Tahoe trucks, TG grabs, DAM coupling lever. Most of the steel cars that I do need steel running boards, or plastic cars I'll put on a Kadee running board because they are so much nicer than anything else. And I have a hell of a time with those etched ones. I don't like them at all. So anyway, the railroad has to go. Landfill, here we come. We're moving to a new house. So the railroad goes away. So what do I do with this now that I've set this thing up for 1958 or newer, and my next railroad is going to be older? I'll just backdate the car, and that should be easy. All I have to do is replace the door. Well, I don't know how many of you ever fooled around with an Intermountain ribside car, but there's no door opening and the doors are glued on.
No.
And mumble. And if this isn't bad enough, I forgot that I did this once and I did it again about 8 years later. Same nonsense. Well, anyway, here, I've got it all scraped off. I think this is probably an Accurail door, but I can't be sure. But that's what should have been on the car to begin with. So I put that back on. And then I moved the placard back up to where it used to be, and then somehow tried to blend the car back together again. And it's a perfectly acceptable model for a backdated railroad when the car would have been new in the early 50s or late 40s.
Clark, I have a question.
Yeah.
The backup, please. Would you go back one picture?
This one?
No, the next one,
This
please.
one.
Yeah.
This one.
Nope. Keep going forward. Forward.
More?
One more. Two more. It was a side view of the car.
Well, that's the end of them.
Oh, that's okay. The point is
What's that?
nothing. There you go. Don't touch it. Leave it alone. Okay. The ladder on those ribside cars made by Ribside Car Company, the top of them, they're curved over and they join the top platform on those cars, don't they?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well. They join what platforms?
The top platform on the corner where the running board is, the corner piece of wood that has the grabs on it.
Oh, the lateral, yeah.
Lateral.
Oh, longitudinal running board.
Thank you. And you've lopped them off. Did you put new ladders on?
Oh, you're talking about
The end ladders.
on the end of the car,
That's the end of your pickup truck.
back to the pickup truck.
Oh,
Still the end of your pickup truck. Okay, the ladder going up the side on the right
Yep.
side.
Yep.
Okay, the top of those things have as coming out of the kit, they're curved. The top rungs are curved.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yes. Now you would have to get RP Psych 18 out and look at the real cars to know if they were that way or not. But this is
Okay.
the Intermountain model. They're not that way. These are just square at the top, as you can see.
Yes, I see that.
Now we'll look at go back here. And yes, these are taller, but they're also, well, they're not square, they're a little rounded. But
Okay.
this is an older, yeah, I couldn't, it's difference between, you can see on the real car here, that's the model, the real car, the ladder actually goes up like the ribside car, not like this Intermountain car. It actually goes up further. And it's not rounded at the top.
Yeah.
appears.
Okay. So I'm going to lop mine off because they get caught on my sleeve. They get
Oh,
caught.
I see what you mean.
They
I thought
come-
you meant rounded at the top like these.
No, there's
Okay,
there's a curve like a caboose curve going to the roof of a caboose. Big hook on the thing.
oh,
At least on the rib side cars, which are now made by AccuRail.
yes. Anyway, where were we? Here. One of the local guys got this Ford Dodge car somewhere and said, here, you can have this. And I said, boy, what the heck do I want with an AccuRail car? But I didn't at the time realize that the AccuRail cars do have some value. And it looks a lot like this car. I'm not a Burlington freak, so I don't know what its XM number is, 15, 16, whatever the hell it is. But anyway, the Burlington like to add a bunch of stiffeners to these angle iron or Z-bar outside brace mechanisms. And so I used styrene to make the little shapes at the top. And then there were some down by the doors. I used Archer rivets on those. This would be a close-up of that. And then a lot of cars, single sheath cars, they had a strap iron over that first set of Z-bars so that the door wouldn't catch on them and it'd slide over. On the end of the car, more Tichy stuff standard. This is what you got to do to make an Afton car, AccuRail car usable. And this one I put a resin running board on. But what I was talking about before, these longitudinal running boards, the USRA cars had these, had the boards running perpendicular to the running board. And for some reason, this car did too. So I made some out of styrene and put on there. And this time you can see I used an eye bolt in the corner too, but I think that gets a little bit gaudy. I prefer just putting a little stub of a wire in there. And underside, add a little bit, some rods and a pipe just to give it something. And then this is the car when it's finished. So AccuRail cars can be made into nice cars. Matter of fact, I have about a half a dozen of them, single sheath cars that I've made into one type of a car or another. I may have done some of them on a previous talk. I think I did on this group. But anyway, getting into modern times when we move in the new house, got the new railroad built, and it's a branch line. And the guy says, "Here, you can have this." And he gives me this. It's a Bachmann mobile, undecorated at the time engine, because you could buy these things at this time 10 years ago or so on eBay for about $100 or less with sound in them. And they're really nice running engines. They are by far really engines. And so anyway, when I first got it, I had years ago, I had made had Rail Graphics make some custom decals for Insano steam engines, and ended up selling off or using up what I had. But KJ Trains had it placed an order for a bunch, so I was able to get some from him to do this locomotive. And about all I did to it to start with was just get rid of the crappy couplers, put Katie's on it, weather it somewhat with Pan Pastels, and I used put sunshades on it. And then this would be the other side of the locomotive. And from the back, now this thing comes with the backup light offset, so it's on one side of the tender, and I will change that to center position. But this one here, I don't know where this engine came from. I remember selling it and getting a whole bunch more money for it than I thought I would. But anyway, the real railroad had a ladder to get up onto the top of the boiler, so I added that. They also had spoilers or spark arresters or spark deflectors on the back of the cab, which is a real pain in the rear to put on. And then I centered the backup light. So that's about all I've done to these guys. Add the flags on the front for running extra. And then this would be the other side of the locomotive. I don't know if any of you ever operated Bill Darnaby's before, but they actually remove the flags. They'll take them out of the engine and they'll put in a different one if it's a second section or if it's an extra or not needing it. And how in the hell they can see to do that's beyond me. Well, anyway, these once people know you like trains, it's the gift that keeps on giving. So this is what I have now in my stockpile that I didn't ask for. These were given to me. And I'll probably build the 2 resin cars this winter, that Northwestern cars in Athens. That'll go for $5 at flea market. And the other 2 plastic cars, I may take the Boston and Maine and make it Great Western. But that Ian C&BT car, I'm not quite sure what the hell to do with that. We'll figure something out. But being as I took half of this program away, I thought I would put in what I'm working on now. A couple of years ago at a swap meet, I was there with some of the guys at a table. And after the meet was over, one of the vendors came over to me with this pile of, I think he had 5 of these Ertl cars without roofs. Some of them were missing doors. Grab irons were broken off of them. And he said, "Will you give me $10 for these?" And I said, "What the hell?" So they were in a drawer, and I finally was in between doing projects. So I pulled one out and I took it apart as much as I could. Got it broken down here into the basic pieces. This was taken with iPhone, and I can see my focus is on the wrong corner. But anyway, it shows you all the grab irons, drill out the holes for the grabs that were there. If the grabs were still good, I wouldn't have replaced them, but too many of them were broken off. And the same with the sill steps. I used A-line again for those. And then later on, this is another photo of the end of the car where I've added the retainer valve and TG parts for the brake rigging. I haven't put in a coupling lever on here before because the USRA cars came with Karmer cut levers, and I have some, but I hadn't dug them out yet. I did put the bottom back together again, use K brakes like the cars were supposed to have had. for the roofs of these things, I thought, well, when I first bought them, I could just make my own because there's nothing to these XLA type roofs. And I had to order some decals from Westerfield, and I thought, well, I'll just have him make me some roofs. So I did, and his roofs turned out to be a little shorter than the car. So I added a piece of 4x4 to the ends. Now, not being one to want to measure anything, I made the piece a little bit wider, longer, like on the one on the right, and then use rail nipper or the sprue nippers to cut them off so they're flush at the proper width. Okay, this particular car that I'm going to model had a new door put on it with the camel fixtures down on the bottom. And so that had rollers, it would roll along a bottom door track. And the original car had cleats that came out so that the door, that was a top hung door, and it would just roll along through those cleats. So I cut all those off, but I thought at the time that lower door track was going to ride on them, so I left them there. Well, it doesn't. It's up higher than that. So you can, and then let me go back a second. Now, once I've got this far, it dawns on me, I have to paint this thing, and it's 2 colors. And now I've got how am I going to mask this thing off after I put all the damn grab irons on it?
Mhm.
So what I did is I painted the sides with True Color Northwestern freight car color. And then I used a cardstock to mask off just hold it against the ends and paint the ends black and hold against the side of the body and paint the underside black. And I got a little overspray on one end, and you can see my door there. So I had to go back, hold the card over the black and paint the brown again. And I just done it so that the paint is still wet where you can see that I put it on. I also painted the Tichy running board and the roof black while I was at it. Now, before I can add the roof, I had put a ridge pole in so that the roof would be a little more sturdy than because they're molded flat and you have to, break them basically in order to get them so they'll have a peak to them. And I've never yet got one where I can keep it in one piece and try and put an angle to it. Well, anyway, here the roof has been added and running board's been put on. And those little gray things there on the sprues, those are the running board end supports. Now, this is the car that I'm trying to model. I probably should have showed this earlier, but I just put this in here half an hour ago. And it shows you things that I didn't do to the car because I didn't look at the damn picture when I was building it. And the thing did not have cardmark cut levers. It had an old top mounted lever. And it also has the supports for the longitudinal. The USRA had them. Instead of both of them being on the side of the car, one was on the side, one was on the end.
Huh. Hmm.
So today, I put the decals on, put the rest of it together, put the decals on it. And this is one side that's done. These are old Oddballs decals. And I painted them all with micro scale decal film just to make sure they didn't fall apart because they were thin when they were new. I also went over and painted the metal that goes on the side of the car black. It was something that was done. I don't think it was standard throughout the industry, but generally on cars with this old paint from the 30s and 40s, they would paint the metal parts black and the wood parts with the boxcar red. And I have pictures of these cars freshly painted where it shows they painted those corner supports.
Hmm.
And that's it. I'm done. That's all there is. I got to do the other side tomorrow and put the trucks under it and the couplers and weather it, and it'll be ready for the railroad in no time. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Yeah, keep that up. Don't move it. I don't want to see the back of your truck either. Okay. The chalk marks that the Carmen would do. Exactly what is that all about? I don't understand this.
Okay, usually they were put on by people in a yard as to where the car was supposed to go. These had particular chalk marks on here are custom made by a guy, sent me a sheet of them. But that was basically it had something to do with the routing of the car. In later years, before they get crazy and deface private property, you also had guys putting their hobos putting their own little face. You know, the guy
Oh, I've
sitting
seen
under the
that.
palm
I've seen.
tree, you
Yeah.
know, things like that. But these were actually put on by the railroad to let them know where the car was supposed to go.
Yeah, I got a sheet of them too that I've used. I just wasn't quite aware of the function of it. And who
Yeah,
saw
whether
it?
they don't make any sense to me, but that's what they're there for. Somebody would mark those cars, a clerk or a yard foreman, and then the
Yeah,
crew would have some idea where the car was supposed to go.
the Pennsy even did it with cabooses, or excuse me, cabin cars.
Right.
Get struck with lightning.
Yeah, that could be. If they were going to go into a yard, they wanted to maybe put it on a train.
Yeah.
They would mark on it some way where they would know. I know that a lot of yards too, the hand signals that the crew would use, they would make up their own signals for where they wanted cars to go.
Yeah.
And if you weren't familiar with that yard, you wouldn't know what the heck these guys were trying to tell you.
Yeah.
But that's their purpose.
Sometimes also those chalk marks were used, like on the M&S. Many of the industries had absolute certain doors that car had to be spotted at. The
Right.
car had to be either the right side or the left side on a certain spot. So some of those marks were used for that purpose, as to tell them which way it was supposed to be, what the customer really wanted.
I used to actually chalk cars when I worked at Janesville. The auto plant had 3 tracks. One of them was could hold 16 cars, and I'd put the track number and a dash, and then the spot number, because every one of those 16 cars had to be in order.
I like it.
That was quite a job doing that, getting it all straight.
How did the people at the platform know which was your writing if there were multiple chalk marks?
It depends where you put it. You know, I would try to put it in a certain spot so I would know it was mine. I heard other older conductors that they said if it was raining out, instead of using chalk, they would use a yellow crayon, you know, those big thick yellow crayons.
Sure, a grease pen or grease crayon. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You know, Ken.
I do.
In fact, there was a guy from Manitowoc that told me that. And I just read some of Drogy's, John Drogy's book on yards and trains or whatever. And he writes in there that, well, this is back in 1910, we're talking, they had code numbers for a certain blocks of cars, and then they're like A, B, C, D. So they would put a B and then a dash, whatever track it was supposed to go to, you know, like B29 or whatever. So, yeah. I imagine there were all kinds of codes for that. So,
okay, thanks.
The other thing about, because we're looking at this thing,
mm,
the decals that he used for this car are for a 25,000 series car, and those came to the railroad in 1940. So he put a Marshalltown Freeway on it, 940. But being this car is an ex CMO car and was numbered in the 51,000s, they actually came on the railroad in 41.
Hmm.
And there was no way, it's hard to see these decals, even the big ones, on the sheet. And there was no extra little bitty letters. So there was no way I was gonna change that to a 1 from a 0. Now y'all know the car's wrong. But
Do you
anyway,
have- Do you have
it's
that,
close enough.
do you have that tattooed on your arm, that information?
No, but I have it written down.
Oh,
No,
Okay.
someone smarter than me gave it to me.
just wondering.
That's how you get all this stuff. There's always somebody smarter that you can
Sure.
steal stuff from.
Yeah,
Anyway,
All right. Well, great
What-
job, Clark. Thank you very much for the presentation.
well, yeah, it wasn't, there was a lot more to it at one time.
All right, next week, we will take a week off. We will not meet. And I'm looking for my schedule here. The week after that, I think we have Chuck Schwartz, who is going to do removable loads for flat cars and gondolas, whatever it is. And then, Ron,
yeah.
I'm thinking the 26th of October, we'll do your tree presentation. Does that sound all right?
He's not it off.
Gotta wake him up. He went to sleep.
No, I'm here, I'm here,
Oh, good.
doing two
Just
things
woke
at one
up.
time, and I've got several things whenever somebody wants it.
So that'll be the 26th. So that gives you good almost 3 weeks to be ready.
I got about 5 things already,
Okay, great.
so
And
you
of
don't know what
course-
you're gonna get at this point, though.
That's right. Plenty of open spaces on the calendar. So if anybody else wants to present anything, just let me know or let Ron know, and we'll get you on the schedule. So next week, no meeting. Our next meeting then will be the 19th. Okay.
All right.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining.
bye.
Thanks
Yeah.
again,
Bye.
Clark. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark.